There is a clearing in the jungle. It has no marker, no monument, no path. The men who stopped there named it for what they lost. One of their horses died in that clearing, and the name stayed, Dead Horse Camp. It was from this patch of flattened earth, deep in the Matokriso, that the final words of Colonel Percy Harrison Fawcett reached the outside world. May 29th, 1925. We are now at Dead Horse Camp. You need have no fear of failure. Then, nothing. The jungle closed over the clearing. The vines grew back. The coordinates on the map became a question that 100 men would die trying to answer. The clearing is still there. Somewhere, the jungle does not give up its dead, and it has never given up Percy Fawcett. He was not supposed to be an explorer. He was an artillery officer, a surveyor, a man who measured the boundaries of things. Born in 1867, Torquay on the English coast, son of a cricketer and an Indian Army officer's daughter. Commissioned into the Royal Artillery at 19, served in Ceylon, married Nina Agnes Patterson in 1901. A life that looked, on paper, entirely ordinary. And then the Royal Geographical Society sent him to South America to map borders between Bolivia and Brazil. That was 1906. He was 39 years old, and the Amazon got into his blood. He went back. 1908, 1911, 1913. He mapped rivers that had no names. He made contact with tribes that had never seen a European face. He survived diseases that killed his companions. He earned a reputation, the man who could walk into the jungle and walk back out. He was calm, disciplined. He never fired on indigenous people. He believed violence invited violence. The tribes respected him. Some may have even trusted him. And somewhere in those years of survey work, triangulating borders, measuring river depths, talking to indigenous guides through interpreters, he became convinced of something the scientific establishment considered absurd. There was a city in the jungle. Not El Dorado. Fawcett had nothing but contempt for that myth, called it a fantasy of greedy conquistadors who saw gold in every indigenous story. No, this was something else. A civilization that predated the Amazon's current inhabitants. Stone roads, grand plazas, a culture that rose and fell while Europe was still in the Dark Ages. He called it simply Z. Fawcett's own sketches, hand-drawn maps, diagrams of what he believed Z looked like. Archival documents, close-up on the pages of manuscript 512.
His evidence was thin by modern standards, but not imaginary.
A Portuguese document from 1753, manuscript 512, described a ruined city deep in the Brazilian interior, written by a bandeirante, a Portuguese fortune hunter. It spoke of stone arches, a plaza with a black stone column, hieroglyphic carvings no one could read. The document had been filed in the National Library of Brazil for over a century. Fawcett found it, studied it, became certain. He cross-referenced it with indigenous accounts. He triangulated locations. He built a theory that consumed the rest of his life. The Royal Geographical Society dismissed it. The press mocked him. But Fawcett had spent more time in the Amazon than any European alive. He believed the jungle was hiding something, and he intended to be the one to find it. The First World War interrupted everything. Fawcett served on the Western Front. He commanded artillery batteries. He was gassed. He watched a generation die in the mud of Flanders. When the war ended, he was 51 years old. His lungs were damaged. His finances were ruined. His body carried the cost of 4 years in the trenches. But the jungle still called.
Archival World War I footage, artillery, trenches, gas masks. Then a hard cut to lush jungle. The contrast. Silence after noise. He spent the early 1920s raising funds, lecturing, writing articles for newspapers. He approached the Royal Geographical Society again.
They declined. Again.
He found private backers, a group of London financiers who called themselves the Glove. They believed in his theory enough to write checks.
He sold the story rights to North American newspapers. He scraped together just enough.
By April 1925, he was ready.
The expedition was small, intentionally. Fawcett believed large parties antagonized tribes. They moved too slowly. They consumed too many supplies. He took 2 companions. His son, Jack Fawcett, 21 years old, handsome, athletic, raised on his father's letters from the jungle, always promising the next expedition, always promising to take him. Jack had grown up in the shadow of a father who was never there. This was his chance.
And Jack's best friend, Raleigh Rummel, also 21, son of a London doctor.
He had never been to the jungle. No survival training, no experience in extreme conditions. He was coming because Jack was coming. Photographs of Jack Fawcett and Raleigh Rummel, young men smiling, unaware. Archival footage of 1920s expedition gear, compasses, sextants, rifles, canvas tents, leather boots. They carried minimal supplies. Fawcett was famous for traveling light. No heavy equipment, no large retinue of porters, just essentials: rifles, machetes, surveying instruments, medicine, and a compass that had guided him through 3 previous expeditions. They departed from Cuiabá, the last outpost of Brazilian civilization, on April 20th, 1925.
2 Brazilian guides accompanied them for the first leg. Then, even the guides turned back. Fawcett, Jack, and Rummel walked into the jungle alone.
Dead Horse Camp. Approximate coordinates: 11 degrees 43 minutes south, 54 degrees 35 minutes west. A month after leaving Cuiabá, the 3 men reached it. They were already exhausted. The jungle was harder than anything Rummel had ever imagined. Insects that burrowed into skin, humidity that never broke, boots rotting off feet, the constant wet.
Jack was holding up, young, strong, determined to prove himself.
But Rummel was unraveling. Fever, infected insect bites, the slow collapse of a body never conditioned for the Amazon. And yet, from that clearing, Fawcett wrote with confidence, "We are now at Dead Horse Camp. You need have no fear of failure." He sent the letter back with an indigenous runner, one of the last links to the outside world. The runner carried it through the jungle, walked for days, and delivered it to a telegraph station. From there, the words traveled by wire, by ship, and eventually reached Fawcett's wife Nina in England. She read it. She filed it. She waited for the next one. It never came. From Dead Horse Camp, Fawcett made a decision that sealed everything. He told his remaining indigenous guides to turn back. He, Jack, and Rummel would proceed alone. Only the 3 of them. Smaller party, faster movement, less visible. He was half right. The guides left. The 3 men packed their gear. And on a morning in late May 1925, they walked east, into territory no European had ever entered. Behind them, Dead Horse Camp fell silent.
The world did not realize they were missing for months. Fawcett had warned that the expedition would take time. He had told Nina he might be unreachable for a year, maybe more. The jungle swallowed communication. No radios, no telegraphs, just silence. By early 1926, Nina began to worry. By 1927, the world noticed. The Royal Geographical Society, the same institution that had dismissed Fawcett's theories, launched the first rescue mission in 1928. Commander George Miller Diet led a party into the Mato Grosso. They hacked through the same jungle. They reached the general area where Fawcett had last been reported. They found nothing. No bodies, no equipment, no compass, no journal pages, no buttons from a jacket, not a single artifact. But they did find something. The indigenous people they encountered, the Anahuac and the Kalapalo, told a story. The Kalapalo said they had seen the three white men walking east. They had warned them. Hostile tribes ahead. The Suya, dangerous territory. The men walked on anyway. And later, the Kalapalo said they saw smoke rising from the direction the men had traveled. Campfire smoke. For 5 days, the smoke continued. At night, the faint orange glow of a campfire visible through the trees. Then it stopped. After the smoke stopped, the Kalapalo said they heard nothing more. Diet returned to England with this account. He believed Fawcett and his companions had been killed, murdered by a hostile tribe. Case closed. The public was not satisfied. They never are. Between 1928 and the mid-1950s,
At least 13 expeditions went looking for Percy Fawcett. They came from England, from Brazil, from the United States. Funded by newspapers competing for the story, by scientific societies, by private obsession. Some of the searchers were professionals. Some were amateurs who had read about Fawcett in the papers and decided they would be the one to solve the mystery. Some came back empty-handed. Some did not come back at all. The death toll from the Fawcett search expeditions is estimated at over 100 people. Drowned in rapids, killed by disease, attacked by tribes, vanished without explanation. More people died looking for Percy Fawcett than were on his original expedition by a factor of 30. In 1932, a Swiss trapper named Stefan Ratten claimed to have met an elderly white man in the jungle, bearded, weathered, speaking broken Portuguese, who might have been Fawcett. The story was investigated. It collapsed under scrutiny. In 1933, a compass was found in the possession of a Bakairi tribe. It was identified as possibly Fawcett's. The trail led nowhere. In 1943, a Brazilian expedition found a skeleton. The bones were sent for analysis, not Fawcett's. In 1947, a missionary reported seeing a white child in a Kalapalo village, blue-eyed. The implication? Jack Fawcett had survived, had fathered children. Investigated, unverified.
The jungle offered fragments, never answers.
Then in 1951, the most significant testimony emerged. Orlando Villas-Boas was a Brazilian explorer and indigenous rights activist, arguably the most respected figure in the history of Amazonian exploration. He and his brother Claudio had spent years living among the tribes of the Xingu. They spoke the languages, they knew the elders, they had earned trust that no outsider had ever been granted. The Kalapalo elders told them a story, a precise, detailed oral account that had been passed down for 26 years. According to the Kalapalo, the three white men had been seen, walking east, thin, exhausted. The older man, Fawcett, was courteous. He communicated through gestures. He offered small gifts, a knife, some beads. The Kalapalo told them not to proceed. The territory ahead belonged to a hostile group. The men did not listen. They walked on. They camped by the river.
And then the Kalapalo heard, through trading networks, through messengers, that the men had been killed by the Suya or by another group. The details were consistent. Clubbed to death, bodies disposed of in the river, or buried in shallow graves where the jungle would erase them within weeks.
The Kalapalo even led Villas-Boas to a burial site. They exhumed bones. Villas-Boas believed they were Fawcett's. He sent them to London. The Royal Anthropological Institute tested them. The conclusion? Not Fawcett's. The bones were too short. Fawcett stood over 6 feet tall. These bones belonged to a shorter man. The dental work did not match. The bones were not Fawcett's. But the story was never disproven.
More than a century later, the theories have not settled. They have multiplied. Theory 1. Murder by indigenous tribes. The most widely accepted explanation. The Kalapalo account is consistent. The details match what is known about intertribal dynamics in the Xingu in the 1920s. Fawcett had a policy of non-violence. He never fired on indigenous people, but he was entering territory where his reputation did not precede him. The Suya, or another group, may have seen 3 armed white men as a threat and acted accordingly. The problem? If they were killed, why was nothing ever found? No equipment, no clothing, no compass. 13 expeditions, 50 years, 0 physical evidence. The jungle preserves some things. It destroys others. But total erasure? That is rare. Theory 2. Disease and starvation. Rimmel was already sick at Dead Horse Camp. By late May, the rainy season was beginning. Rivers rising, food scarce, insects swarming. All 3 men could have weakened rapidly. Malaria, dysentery, infected wounds. In that condition, even a minor injury becomes fatal. A twisted ankle, a cut that turns septic. Within days, all 3 could have been dead. The problem? If they died of natural causes, their bodies should have been found. 3 corpses do not vanish completely, even in the Amazon. Scavengers scatter bones, but they scatter them. They do not dissolve them. Theory 3. They chose to stay. This theory has a strange, persistent life. Some believe Fawcett found what he was looking for. Not Z exactly, but a life among the indigenous people. A deliberate disappearance. That Jack married into a tribe. That somewhere in the Xingu, there are descendants who carry Fawcett's blood. In the 1930s, a young man named Dolipi emerged from the jungle, claiming to be Fawcett's grandson. Light-skinned, blue-eyed. His story was investigated. It could not be verified, but it could not be entirely dismissed either. In 1951, a journalist named Albert de Wavrin photographed a white-skinned child in a Xingu village. The photograph exists. It proves nothing. The de Wavrin photograph, a child who does not look like the others. Kalapalo children playing. The faces of a mixed people. Theory 4. They found Z, and Z killed them. The most haunting possibility. What if Fawcett reached his city? What if Z was real? Not gold, not treasure, but a place so remote, so inaccessible, that leaving was impossible. A labyrinth of stone and jungle where 3 men could disappear and never be extracted. Or what if Z was an archaeological site, a real one, and Fawcett died inside it, his bones still there, buried under 1,000 years of earth and roots, and the weight of a jungle that had already swallowed one civilization and was more than capable of swallowing another. In 1979, 54 years after Fawcett vanished, a Brazilian settler named Elias Manuel da Silva walked into a police station in the Mato Grosso. He was carrying a gold signet ring. The ring was engraved with the Fawcett family crest.
It matched descriptions of a ring Percy Fawcett was known to wear. The crest was verified. The ring was authentic. De Silva claimed he had found it in the jungle. Then, under questioning, his story changed. He admitted to killing a man, a European, decades earlier, shot him, buried the body. Then he recanted. Then he confessed again. Then he recanted again. The interrogators could not hold a story together long enough to act on it. He was arrested. He led police to a site he claimed was the grave. They dug. They found bones. The bones were tested. Not Fawcett's. But the ring was real. The crest was real. How did Elias Manuel de Silva, a settler with no connection to the Fawcett family, no known access to their possessions, obtain a ring belonging to Percy Harrison Fawcett? He died before anyone got a consistent answer. Here is the part that most accounts leave out. Fawcett was mocked in his lifetime. The lost city of Z was considered a fantasy, the obsession of an aging man who had spent too many years in the jungle, who had listened to too many indigenous stories, who had convinced himself of something that could not possibly exist. The scientific consensus at the time was absolute. The Amazon could not support a large-scale civilization. The soil was too poor. The jungle was too hostile. No city could rise there. Then, starting in the 1990s, archaeologists began to find things. In the Xingu region, the exact area Fawcett was searching, researchers discovered the remains of a vast pre-Columbian civilization. Not a single city, but a network of settlements connected by engineered roads, earthworks that redirected rivers, raised agricultural fields, defensive ditches, central plazas that could hold thousands. The largest site, Kuhikugu, covers over 20 square kilometers. It was occupied from roughly 200 AD to 1600 AD. At its peak, the population may have reached 50,000 people. A city in the jungle. Fawcett was looking for Z, a single lost city of stone and arches. What he may have been walking toward was something much larger, a civilization of wood and earth, invisible to the European eye because it did not look like a European city. The jungle had swallowed it completely. It still hides more than it is revealed. He had the wrong shape. He had the wrong name. But he may have been right about the thing that mattered. Dead Horse Camp. There is no marker now, no monument, no path that leads to the patch of earth where three men camped in the last days of May 1925 and wrote a final letter home. The coordinates exist on paper. 11 degrees 43 feet south, 54 degrees 35 feet west. But the jungle has shifted. Rivers have changed course. The clearing where a horse died and gave the place its name has been reclaimed by roots and vines and the relentless, patient pressure of growth. If you stood in that clearing today, if you could find it, you would hear nothing but insects and bird calls and the distant sound of moving water. The same sounds Fawcett heard as he packed his compass and his journal and walked east on a morning in late May 1925. He was 57 years old. His body was already failing. He had been gassed in the trenches of the Western Front. He had survived malaria and snakebite and starvation on previous expeditions. He knew the jungle better than any European alive. And he walked into it anyway. Not for gold, not for glory, not because he was lost, because he believed there was something there, something real, something that had been waiting for centuries to be found. The question that hangs over Dead Horse Camp is not really what killed Percy Fawcett. The question is what he saw before it killed him. Why did Fawcett insist on traveling with only two companions? One of them a novice who had never set foot in the jungle,
Why did he dismiss his indigenous guides at Dead Horse Camp, cutting the last link to the outside world? Why did he believe with such unshakable conviction that Z existed when every authority of his era told him it could not? Why did the Kalapalo, 26 years later, lead the Villas-Boas brothers to a burial site, a site that contained bones that were not Fawcett's, but whose story was consistent in every other detail? Why did a settler in 1979 possess a ring bearing the Fawcett family crest? And why did his confession fracture under pressure into fragments that could not be assembled? Why, after 13 expeditions, after more than 100 deaths, after a century of searching, has no one found a single piece of physical evidence? Not a compass, not a button, not a page of a journal. 3 men, the largest jungle on Earth, and not one trace. The Amazon took them. The Amazon kept them. And the Amazon may be the only witness that knows what really happened. Dead Horse Camp has no coordinates on any map you can visit. It exists now only as a name given to a clearing by men who did not know they would never leave the jungle. The clearing has grown over. The letter Fawcett sent from it has turned brittle in an archive, the ink fading, the words still legible. You need have no fear of failure. Percy Harrison Fawcett, born August 18, 1867, in Torquay, England. Surveyor, artillery officer, explorer, father, believer in a city the world said did not exist. Jack Fawcett, born 1903, 21 years old when he followed his father into the jungle to become legend. Raleigh Ramel, also 21, the friend who came because his friend was going. 3 men who walked east from a clearing in the jungle in May 1925 and entered a silence that has lasted for more than a century now. There is a clearing in the jungle. It has no marker, no monument, no path. The jungle closed over it. And somewhere beneath the canopy, under a century of roots and rain and the weight of a wilderness that has never answered a single question, the truth still waits.